11:30, so we'll make a start. Welcome to today's planning committee meeting of 11th of November, and I'd like to welcome members of the public, if you're on screen, and obviously in the front of the room, councillors and officers to this meeting. Before, though, I call upon the clerk to advise us how the meeting will run this afternoon, I just wanted to hold a 1 minute silence in respect to the forces and the people who've fallen over the years in fighting for freedom for our country and our land and the world, frankly. So if we can just do that for a moment now and bow our heads. Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Clark.
Thank you, Chairman. Please note that we're live streaming the meeting via the Council's YouTube channel to encourage more people to engage in our public meetings. The proceedings of the meeting will also be recorded. Please may I remind everyone to use their microphone when speaking and make sure it's turned off once they have finished. Please can attendees refrain from watching the live stream, as this will cause interference to our viewers. Please can I also remind you to ensure that your mobile phones and iPads are turned to silent. We are not expecting a fire alarm testing today. In the event of an evacuation, please leave by the nearest exit, which is the exit on the corner, and gather in the car park next to the library opposite Tesco. Should members of the public need to use the facilities, please make yourself known to the security who will provide access. In accordance with the Constitution, members of the public who have registered to speak will be permitted to do so when invited by the Chair. I have confirmed those entitled to speak. Please note that registered speakers are not permitted to approach the committee members or distribute documentation to the committee during the course of this meeting. Each application will be dealt with in the following order. The Planning Officer will present the submitted application and will outline the proposed recommendation in full. Any speakers registered to speak on the application will be invited to address the committee. This will then be taken in the following order: speakers against, neighbourhood forum representatives, any councillors who are not members of the committee, followed by any speakers in support of the application. All speakers will have a maximum of 5 minutes each to address the meeting. This will be followed by questions from members and responses from the Planning Officer. Once questions from the committee have concluded, the Chair will open the application for debate. At the conclusion of the debate, the Chair will seek a proposer and seconder for the application. The proposal must be in full and include all information such as conditions or reasons. The Chair will then confirm with the Planning Officer if they wish to enter into a period of summing up. Members, if at any point you need to leave the meeting during consideration of an application, you will be unable to vote on that application, and I will now hand the Chair back to Councillor Brooke. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Clark. Are there any apologies or updates for the membership of the committee, please?
No, Chairman.
Thank you. Looking at the minutes of the 14th of October, need to just confirm a correct record. Do I have a proposer for them? Councillor Pentney, seconder. Councillor Tolchard. All those in favour? Thank you. Turning to declarations of interest, do any of the members of the committee here have any pecuniary or non-pecuniary interest on any, well, the one item that we have on the agenda today? Please raise your hand.
No indication, Chairman.
Thank you. And turning to officers here, have you any pecuniary or non-pecuniary interests on the item today?
No, Chairman.
Thank you. And finally, urgent items. Are there any urgent items?
No, Chairman.
Wonderful. Right, so committee, we're just going to now move on to item 5, which is to consider the application for Torbay Hospital, Newton Road, Torquay application number P/2024/0001. The clerk has confirmed those who have registered to speak upon entry to the meeting. I will therefore ask David Edmondson to introduce the application.
Thank you, Chair. I'm going to introduce it, but actually it's going to be presented by the dedicated case officer who unfortunately is unwell and not able to be here this evening. But Alexis Moran has done a presentation for each of the slides that will come up on the screen, and I understand it will be on the live streaming as well, so it'll be no different from normal. I just hope the acoustics are okay and you can hear his voice with this presentation. But when we come to questions later on, I can always come back to any of the slides in the presentation. But I'll set that off now, and then we'll take questions later.
The site is located to the south of the hospital on a triangular area of land. The application seeks permission for a new 4 to 5 storey clinical hub building and electrical substation. It seeks a betterment of existing facilities and does not result in an increase in employment numbers or capacity. This image shows one of the current buildings on site, which is in a poor state and is currently used as temporary offices. The site is located to the south of the hospital on a triangular area of land. The application seeks permission for a new 4 to 5 storey clinical hub building and electrical substation. It seeks a betterment of existing facilities and does not result in an increase. This image shows the context of the site, which is currently occupied by a number of buildings, generally no longer fit for purpose. The larger of the buildings here are 3 storeys or approximately 9.5 metres in height. This image shows one of the current buildings on site, which is in a poor state and is currently used as temporary offices. This image is taken from the corner of the site and shows that there is a 3 to 4 metre difference in levels from north to the south. Additionally, there is a drop across the site of approximately 1.5 metres. This is the current layout, which shows the application site with the existing buildings. And here we can see the proposed layout, which shows that the clinical hub building is L-shaped, with a length of approximately 51 metres, and a width at its widest point of 38 metres, and 14 metres at its narrowest point. The operational works here also include the provision of a new footpath outside the new building, and the widening of the road to provide pedestrian access to the new building, and to allow links to the wider facilities. The proposal includes the removal of 15 trees protected by an area tree preservation order. The loss of these trees is mitigated through a Section 106 payment of £71,531 and new planting to the southeast. The clinical hub consists of a loading bay for deliveries and plant space at lower ground floor level. The ground floor would house the relocated breast care department. The current breast care building will be demolished. The first floor is to be used to accommodate existing admin staff from various departments. The histopathology department is currently located within a porter cabin. This department will be moved to the second floor. And an internal plant room is proposed at the third floor. This level is set back from the principal elevation by approximately 6.8 metres. And here we can see the proposed south elevation, which is 18.5 metres from ground level. There's a set of chimneys which protrude beyond the plant roof level by approximately 3 metres. These chimneys are required to extract from histopathology, allowing for the safe removal of contaminated air and provide a safe working environment inside the building. The bulk of the building is broken up by the use of different materials and colours, with the brick plinth to ground level, and through detailing and punctuation such as inset aluminium panels, aluminium windows, and fixtures which provide shadowing. Due to the difference in levels on site, the maximum height of the proposed building is 22.5 metres from ground level on the rear north elevation. And here we can see the west elevation, which is on the corner of the site. And this is the east elevation, which is partly obscured from wider views by a line of mature trees further to the east. This artistic image shows the different materials and colours in more detail, with the brick plinth at ground level and the detail of the inset panels, the inset aluminium windows and the fixtures which provide shadowing, break up the bulk of the building above. The images also show the subservient plant level. The different colours and materials provide wayfinding benefits, making the building more distinguishable from others on site. And this image is taken from the north of the site, showing the corner, and reiterates the wayfinding aspects of the proposal. The applicant submitted a visual impact assessment with the application, and this montage is taken from Shippey Park Road and shows the proposed development in comparison to the existing view. The building can be seen here in the distance. This one is taken from Cadwell Lane, and you can see the building here just above the ridge line of this property. And this one's taken from within the main car park. So moving now on to the key issues and material considerations. In terms of principle, there's clear support for the provision of improvements to facilities at the hospital within the local plan, the neighbourhood plan and the NPPF. In terms of design, the material form and overall character of the building is considered positive, maintains a suitably scaled and detailed building for its context, and adequately acknowledges local character. The proposal is considered to be acceptable on design and visual impact grounds. In terms of residential amenity, there have been no objections. The proposal is set centrally within the hospital site, some distance from its boundaries, and the submitted visual impact assessment shows that the proposal will not be overbearing on its neighbours. Considering the building's location and scale, it's considered to have an acceptable impact on the amenity of occupiers of neighbouring properties. In terms of highways and parking, the proposal results in the loss of 20 parking spaces on this part of the site. In order to mitigate this loss, the Trust have obtained the former NatWest site to the north of the hospital and have created a 20-space car park in this area. The new car park has been demarcated and is currently in use. The proposal does not result in the loss of parking spaces at the hospital in net, and the new facilities do not result in an increase in capacity. Therefore, there's no objection on highways grounds. It is recommended that any permission includes conditions requiring the submission of the delivery and servicing management plan, construction management plan, and cycle parking strategy. In terms of ecology and trees, the proposal results in a loss of 15 trees, which is to be mitigated by a Section 106 payment of £71,531 and tree planting further to the southeast of the site. Beyond this, the site is of limited ecological value, and subject to planning conditions, the proposal is considered to be acceptable on trees, ecological and biodiversity grounds. Moving to flood risk and drainage, the proposal provides a betterment by replacing the existing uncontrolled discharge of public sewer with a controlled discharge, and is considered to be acceptable on drainage and flood risk grounds. Finally, low carbon and climate change. The application is supported by an energy statement and includes the use of solar panels and air source heat pumps to deliver low carbon energy, which will reduce the operational carbon emissions of the building, in line with the energy hierarchy of policy SS14. The ambitions of the energy statement are supported and subject to a compliancy condition. The Council's Climate Strategy and Project Officer has confirmed that the proposal is acceptable. So moving on to the officer recommendation, it is one of approval subject to the conditions as outlined, with final drafting delegated to the Divisional Director of Planning, Housing and Climate Emergency. A legal agreement to secure a tree litigation payment of £71,531 and the resolution of any new material considerations that may come to light following planning committee to be delegated to the Divisional Director of Planning, Housing and Climate Emergency, including the addition of any necessary further planning conditions or obligations. Thank you.
Chairman, just to add to that presentation, a couple of clarification over some of the conditions. Firstly, the one on page 30, a construction demolition management plan, the wording should be approved in writing by the local planning authority rather than the council. And also on cycle parking strategy, that prior to the occupation of the hereby permitted development, a cycle parking strategy must be submitted which provides details of the cycle store and approved by the local planning authority. At the moment it just says to be submitted. So with those two clarifications on those conditions, I'll put this recommendation to you. Thank you.
I'll say thank you to Mr Moran, and thank you Mr Edmondson for the clarifications on those conditions. I raised those points with Mr Edmondson earlier on today. So next I'd like to call Dr Rodney Halder. Whilst you take your seat, Dr Halder. Dr Halder is going to speak on behalf of Torquay Neighbourhood Forum to address the committee in support of the application. As usual, Dr Halder, you have 5 minutes and you'll be told if you with 1 minute to go. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. This statement has been reviewed and approved by the steering group of the Torquay Neighbourhood Forum. The Forum did not submit a consultee response as we felt this was not a controversial application and it would receive general support. As it has been presented to the Planning Committee, we consider it is necessary to make a brief statement, as our normal practice is to comment on all applications for Torquay that come before the committee. Provision of state-of-the-art facilities is pivotal in provision of healthcare to Torbay. The NHS has a number of challenges, and provision of purpose-designed buildings should improve efficiency. Within the remit of the Local Plan Policy SS7, this proposal provides crucial infrastructure in support of the population of Torbay. It also provides access to healthcare services required by Local Plan Policy SC1. The hospital buildings are on a dedicated site, and the proposed design is compatible with the other buildings on site. The Forum has no concerns with regard to the design or access. We are pleased to see that 80 new cycle parking spaces are proposed. In conclusion, we hope that the committee will be able to approve this application. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr Halder, and thank you once again for your presentations and the work that the Torquay Neighbourhood Forum puts into this. We don't actually have anyone from the Trust speaking in favour of the application, so I'm going to now ask Councillor Madison to address the meeting.
Thank you, Chair.
And as you know, Councillor Madison, 5 minutes, and you're told it with 1 minute to go. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chair. Evening, committee members and officers. So, hospital expansion is without doubt a good news story, and you know, like most residents of the Bay, I'm entirely supportive and looking forward to seeing the main works get going. But tonight I want to talk exclusively about parking, which in Shippey really isn't a good news story. And we've just heard about the loss of 20 places as a result of this small section of the development, and the treatment of it with like-for-like provision elsewhere. But there is a greater context that I think it's worth bearing in mind, which I'm going to lay out here. Hospital is the leading employer in the Bay, I believe, with well over 3,000 staff. And that's a lot of staff coming into Shippey on a daily basis. And then you have to add in the patients and their visitors. With the overall plans for the development of the hospital, we will be increasing capacity. And that means that we can expect more staff, more patients, and more visitors. And it's the Shippey community who will be bearing the brunt of that. Now, a few months ago, we saw this committee deliberating Edgenswell Station, and it was talked about as a facility in the Torquay Gateway area, but linked to the hospital development. And the truth is that in today's environment, we really can't rely on the funding coming through for that. And we cannot be sure that the station will be built. As for buses, bus services in Shippey have been cut under this current administration. So what is certain is that drivers have and will continue to come to Shippey in ever larger numbers. There seems too often to be an assumption with planning that cars that are parking will be able to be absorbed by the streetscape and local community. But I can assure you as a Shippey councillor, local streets are already at capacity. Street and parking related issues are the single subject coming most to my attention. Residents make their appeals for more parking wardens and more parking controls, which are never forthcoming. And I'm concerned because of the way in which this development, this larger hospital development, will be taking place in a piecemeal fashion, with one item coming to the planning committee after another, that overall picture of what things look like for Shippey may be lost. The way things are done these days tends to chop up responsibilities so that no one body generates a prevailing overall vision. Planning decisions are made here, parking control budgets are set somewhere else, bus routes are decided with Stagecoach and other providers, and so on. But it's our responsibility as councillors and representatives of the public to look at things in the round and as holistically as possible. And you've got that opportunity here. This is a significant development covering a large area, and experience suggests that over time it will grow more. It will undoubtedly affect residents. So let's get that deciding right from the get-go. If we know the capacity is going to increase, then is like for like sufficient? How do we require sufficient parking for our present and future needs? And please don't get schmoozed into thinking that the issues related to the travel component for this larger development will be solved by someone else. Thank you very much for listening, and good deliberations tonight.
Thank you very much, Councillor Madison. So now I'm going to move to the committee time to invite questions to the planning officer. Please may I remind members questions should only cover matters not raised in the presentation. Are there any questions? Councillor Fox.
I suppose I'm concerned that we haven't got somebody here from the trust, because there are questions. There were questions on site and we had a good person showing us round, and I don't want to in any way criticise him. But I think there are likely to be further questions which will arise tonight. And I just want to put on record my disappointment that nobody has come from the trust, and I would hope that next time we have one of these applications, in fact somebody would come. So that's my main issue. Just one more question, that on page 13 of the officer report, in the second paragraph, there's a reference to future flexibility. And I just wondered if somebody could explain to me what that future flexibility means. Thank you.
Through you, Chair. On the first point, they made that decision not to appear tonight, Michael. What I would do is offer to set up a further all-member briefing about the master plan work. You've had a couple, or this administration had a couple of presentations about the master plan work. We could perhaps ask for an update, even though the financial package from the government isn't decided upon yet, but at least have an update on where the overall master planning is for the site, so that all members are brought up to speed with what their latest thinking is, because I recognise some of your questions may well be related to the wider development of this site. So we'll set that up. Mike, you mentioned page 13 at the top.
Yeah,
I can't.
I just find it, I identified it. Yeah, the second paragraph says vehicle access is proposed for servicing the building to the north. The road to the south of the building is proposed to be widened to allow for future flexibility to this part of the hospital campus. I mean, what came to my mind is I do beg your pardon. I think what
Councillor Fox, could you speak your same question again? Thank you.
Yes. So my question is in relation to the second paragraph on page 13, which is referring to future flexibility of this part of the hospital campus, and it seems to be in relation to vehicle access. And I did put the question to the person on site this afternoon whether it would mean a loop road, because I think it's because there's about a 90% join up at the moment, but we haven't quite got there, and whether we've got an opportunity either here or in the main strategic plan to achieve what would be a very beneficial circulation for the hospital. There may be other answers to my question, though.
Thank you, Chair. So for those members that did visit the site, we walked up to the very top section and saw where the road wraps around and potentially could wrap around the entire site, but there are some challenges in terms of tree preservation order covered trees. And I wanted to reassure members, though, that there's no possible access from that residential area where we saw was only for emergency access, only when there's an incident, and it was explained about how if there'd been a major incident in the bay, they would open up that section, but that wouldn't be used for access to the site or for any construction traffic either. But I think the layout is such that there needs to be some scope for what comes from the master planning work to allow for access to this site and to those. I think the redeveloped section of accommodation that we saw in a single block running towards that exit will come forward as part of the master plan as well. So I think they're hedging bets as to what might need to be done in terms of road layout there. Thank you.
Councillor Strang.
I'd also like to echo Councillor Fox's disappointment that the Trust haven't deemed this important enough to attend and answer our questions in person. Moving on from that, obviously the scheme removes an amount of accommodation which is temporary accommodation for doctors and presumed nurses on site. Do we have any clarification of that accommodation being replaced at this time?
I had a response from the Trust this afternoon to say that that would be re-provided elsewhere on the site as part of the master planning work. Again, I recognise Councillor Madson's comment about not knowing what's coming at the next stage. And also, in addition to that, there's been that ongoing negotiation with ourselves as a council on our regeneration sites and other landowners to try and get key worker housing elsewhere across the bay, because it is critical. There's not enough on the site and they want more elsewhere. So that is proposed as being replaced as part of the rest of the development.
Thank you very much.
Councillor Billings.
Thank you, Chair. I wonder if, Mr Edmondson, we can just put up on screen the presentation we had, again, please, and go back to the plan view of the roof, where we've got the solar panels. Thank you, that one. Just wonder if you could help me understand that. The orientation in terms of north-south on that plan, which direction have we got north and south on, please? Because it occurs to me that unless it's pure coincidence, that building isn't necessarily pointing north-south. I think it's how they've chosen to lay it out on that.
but not all solar panels are presented in that manner. They often have to use the roof space they've got, and you can get rockers, I think they're called, to adjust the angles and the positions of them in order to get the maximum return from the sunlight. But it is a bit misleading, that image, because it's not the next image in the scheme shows it probably in a fairer in that angle.
So just taking that one on board, if those solar panels, I notice we've got it as a condition, if they needed to be reoriented from that, would that require a revision to the design, a variation of condition application, or is that something that we would, as a local authority, just accept as a slight variation, please? Could I have that clarification from officers? And also, to the extent that I'm aware that the hospital's got a very strong demand for electricity, if there was the opportunity to put solar panels on other locations of the roof, other than those, would that also require a variation? Please.
Through you, Chair. That condition on solar panels is such that the details need to be submitted and agreed. So I think we'd get that position satisfied at that point and make sure it was getting the ultimate return. And equally, yes, get additional ones if there was scope on the rest of the building, and perhaps the cycle store as well, which is another option. And also potentially look to get solar power from elsewhere than this site for the rest of the development as well, which I know is something we're pursuing.
So that could be dealt with through discharging that condition, doesn't need revised drawings. Brilliant. Thank you very much, Chair.
Any other questions from... I've got one, if nobody else has got one. Just want to go on to the car parking, Mr. Edmondson. When I read the pack, I understood the car parking 2020 was majorly focused on people who are working in the hospital, and there wasn't any anticipation of increase in the number of employment, so that seemed to be clarified there. But I thought I heard Mr. Moran say about the expectation of no increase in capacity. Now, I might have heard that wrong because it wasn't very clear. And so I just want to clarify on capacity, numbers of patients coming, and then, I don't know, with the units, whether they will have visitors, because it's not, I believe the breast care unit and the histopatology is not where you have visitors to patients, it's just patients. So looking at the increased capacity of patients, just get some clarification on that, please.
Yeah, so to clarify, the parking space replacement, the 20 places are staff spaces, and for those that came on the site visit, we drove round and saw the other provision that's been provided down at the bottom of the site, off the site, linked through. Those were considered to be a like-for-like replacement, and therefore our Highways Authority haven't raised any formal objection. But I take the point about the throughput of patients through this new centre, and the fact that it's more efficient and effective, then in theory more could be coming through. So I do recognise that. I haven't got the details of the numbers that might come through and whether or not that's enhanced. Lex did talk about it in his presentation about capacity, but I believe that's a little bit of an unknown. I understand the recent improvements down on the oncology section have made a tremendous difference, and there is an incredible speed through that side. So this could well be the same issue. But that would mean that potentially people are not going to be staying on the site as long, won't be parking for several hours. They'll be in and out and be able to get to appointments much more quickly. So it has a quid pro quo effect on the parking needs on the rest of the site. And just maybe the timing that we were there today, but that top car park that perhaps a lot of people don't realise is right around the top there, didn't seem overly over capacity when we were there, but that's just one visit today.
Councillor Billings and then Councillor Tolchard.
Yes, sorry, Chair. One further question. We've talked about the uses that are currently going on the site. Councillor Strang mentioned accommodation. Yourself, Chair, mentioned in terms of car parking. Just recognising the triumvirate of them, we've got some of the porter cabins at the moment serving administrative uses. To the extent those are required to provide a continuous service, if those were relocated to part of the site for a temporary period, would that need a planning consent of itself, or if it was temporary use, would that be something that could be just happen? Could officers clarify that, please?
We saw those poor state porter cabins, and there is the potential for them to be relocated temporarily. It would need a temporary permission, and they would apply for that if needed. But we were told as well about the change to working practices and the number of administrative staff. The idea is to try and get as many of the non-essential activities on this site off-site. So a lot of people are working from home, and new back office computer system is going to allow them to be able to do that. But for the time being, there is some administrative space in the new build, but we could grant temporary permissions for the relocation of porter cabins elsewhere. Hopefully not. Hopefully they'll move straight on. So.
Thank you. And Councillor Tolchard.
Thank you, Chair. Mr Edmondson has touched upon the point I was going to make about the different ways of working, and I think the gentleman we saw this afternoon did emphasise the point about new ways of working that would mean that probably the numbers of staff that are actually on site at the moment wouldn't need to be there, or would not all be there at the same time. They're sort of not going to be working as one-to-one desks, I think. I just wanted clarification on that. I think that's what I recall him saying. So the sort of loss of 20 replaced by 20 hopefully will be adequate from the staff point of view, at least for the time being. Thank you.
Yes, that was what was confirmed on site today. Also clarified as well was the importance of that electrical substation that's part of this proposal, and how that is to link through to other buildings as part of this scheme. And so as much as it providing the power for this particular site, it's also going to be linked in with some of those other buildings around the site. So that was a critical part of this proposal. So.
Thank you. Any further questions, members? Okay, so I'll just open up the applications debate now. Councillor Strang.
Obviously, we all see that this application is imperative for the Bay. I'm minded that we probably look to try and approve the application. However, I am concerned about the programming of the loss of those accommodation provision and potentially the lack of the parking strategy long term for the site. So perhaps if we are all minded to go down that route, then we need to look at some additional conditioning on the permission if it is granted.
Councillor Fox.
I take what Councillor Strang says. I just wonder whether the way forward on this is to outline our concerns on parking and accommodation, and there clearly are major concerns that we have for the reasons that many members have articulated this evening, that maybe we put an informative together so it doesn't actually delay the granting of permission for this application. But clearly we're going to get further applications coming through for other sections of the hospital, and just something which in fact indicates our requirement maybe before the next application comes in, so there's some urgency to it, that we get to know the trust plans for securing sufficient car parking and sufficient replacement of residential accommodation, and that as part of that, we need to understand what's in the business case. We need to understand what the trust envisage as increased numbers. As Councillor Brooke has said, and others, there is a scope for efficiency, and that efficiency is being met at the moment through increased throughput, and that's very impressive. But there's other sections of the hospital where that may not be the case. And in any event, it would be good to actually relieve some of the existing angst from the surrounding area, where, as Councillor Madison was saying, there are real problems with just a nuisance factor, if you like, in the area. So my suggestion would be that we put together an informative which, as it were, lets the trust know very clearly what our concerns are and what our requirements are. And we can either knock this out tonight, or we could make a reference and then give some indications for the officers perhaps to come up with a slightly better one than I can just knock out in a couple of minutes. Thank you.
Councillor Pentney.
Thank you, Chair. I mean, I think obviously we're all on board with the principle of this development. I think something like only, in a recent inspection, only 10% of the existing estate is deemed to be off standard. So this is playing a small part in that path to progress. For once, I'm going to disagree with Councillor Fox and Councillor Strang. I don't think, this is one part of a much larger programme that's subject to the government's review on releasing the pledged funds around the hospital. I think we're kind of second-guessing the impact on capacity. This isn't a commercial venture where they're investing to improve footfall. Whilst I didn't have the benefit of going to today's site visit, a month or so ago, I did have the benefit of going with the site visit alongside our MP, and they were talking about efficiencies, and that's what the larger programme will deliver. You said the example of oncology, where we met with the head of the oncology department, and he said the waiting list will be reduced from several hundred down to like 20, and that's not driven by any change of morbidity or people particularly getting a need to use it more, just the way they've been able to process those cases. So I think we'd be second guessing if we believe in this forum tonight what impact it's going to have on capacity. And I'm sure the trust is absolutely well aware of parking and issues, so I don't think we'll be telling them anything they don't know. I think they very much want to see that. They want those efficiencies from people not knowing how to navigate the site, because that means missed appointments, which means they have to rebook, so you have repeat customers coming in and again. So I think that they are well aware of the issues, and I think just looking at this one application that's in front of us tonight, we just need to do the right thing and approve as is. I won't vote against any informative or condition put on. I'll listen to that case, but as it stands right now, I think looking at this one application alone, we need to push this and not second guess what the impact on various capacities is going to be.
Councillor Darling.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, it was a very interesting site visit today, obviously, but it would be remiss of me not to talk a little bit more about the parking. I know many of my colleagues here have talked about it, and this is it's excellent that we're going to here improve all our services and greater efficiencies, and that is I fully support that. But as I say, it would be remiss of me not to say about the concerns I do have about the parking. I've seen firsthand and had conversations with patients firsthand, who've been absolutely distraught because they haven't been able to find parking spaces, missed appointments, everything. And, we have to bear in mind that because everybody across Torbay will be using Torbay Hospital at some point, and everybody has trouble with parking. But obviously,
this is a good development. This is better for the hospital. It's an old building, so it does need to, modernise. So I will be supporting it, but we do need to bear in mind, and certainly if other things are coming forward, that the parking issue does need to be dealt with. Thank you.
Councillor Billings.
Thank you, Chair. A couple of points. First of all, like all members, welcome this application. It's a more efficient use of land. The buildings that it proposes to remove, clearly they're not fit for the sort of hospital that we want going forwards. They look very old. They look from a different time period. The new buildings will undoubtedly be more insulated, so they'll reduce carbon emissions, more fit for purpose, and deliver the efficiencies to provide good treatment for all of our people that we all want. So this is really something that we should welcome. Developing those themes, though, I think there's the opportunity to do a better job of providing solar on the roof than what we've got on this. And so I think taking the theme of the informative that Councillor Fox referred to, maybe we can clarify the scope that discharging those conditions could enable more solar panels, could enable a revised orientation to recognise the importance this council provides on reducing carbon towards the path of net zero. In relation to the accommodation, to me, it seems more sensible if accommodation is provided as far as possible off-site. The hospital site as a whole is constrained. There's only so much space. It's surrounded either by industrial uses or by residential uses on all sides. There's not open fields to expand into. So to the extent there is the need to remove accommodation that we've got in this scheme, I think there's the opportunity to provide that elsewhere. I'm sure the hospital are looking into that. We know this council's got a series of regeneration schemes. I'm sure one of those could accommodate key worker accommodation and so deal with that, and that's the subject for other conversations in other circumstances. Taking the issue of parking, in my cabinet role, I heard recently from residents in Rougemont Avenue that were telling me about the parking pressures with their controlled parking zone. So I think all members have got to understand there are issues with parking in the locality of Shippey, as Councillor Madison refers to, and given the whole purpose of this is to get more patients through the doors, see them quicker, and also increase the amount of patients that can be seen at any one time. Otherwise, you wouldn't build a larger building like this. It does occur to me that that it's reasonable to expect the Trust to come forward with proposals about how car parking could be managed on the site. It would have been ideal if we'd got that detail here, but clearly we don't. I think the informative is a sensible way to manage some of these points. Recognising the importance of delivering these facilities, it would be inappropriate, I believe, if this committee put in place conditions that would slow the delivery of these much needed facilities. They are clearly really important to our community. But equally, I do think it would be helpful if we used an informative to lay out the information we would like to see. I think I'd be quite happy if we discussed the principles, the headings that we might want to deal with in relation to those that Councillor Fox mentioned, and then I think the finer detail we could leave as a delegated decision to officers to advance the drafting of that, unless, Chair, you thought it was appropriate to call an adjournment. To me, it's important that we approve this scheme, but I do think there is some information I would like to see in due course. Maybe as part of another application. I don't think, Councillor Pentney, an informative is an unreasonable ask. It's not going to stop them slowing down delivering this. It just provides a heads up for a future application in terms of the information that the Council, this committee, would like to come forward. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Fox.
I don't disagree with Councillor Pentney, and I think we're all agree that we want this application to go through as quickly as possible. There's major healthcare improvements. We've seen lots of very strong arguments and some really good things about the application. I mean, some of the carbon provisions that we've not mentioned yet. I think the 80 cycle spaces as well. But I think the informative, and again we can leave it to the officers to come up with a detailed wording, but I would agree with Councillor Billings that we could put I think there's three main areas for it. We've got the solar panels, for example, that could go in, the sufficient car parking, and the accommodation. Even if it's off-site, we need to know where it is, because we don't want to leave. I think Raz was saying earlier in our briefing about we don't want people being homeless in between, and I think that humour sort of brings it home in a good way. And it would just be helpful if we knew from the Trust, and if they were here they could have explained it to us, but they're not here. It would help us just to know what the business plan is envisaging in terms of the increased demand over the period that they're making provision for. That would be very useful information. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Fox. Anyone else? I think for me, members, it's whether we do an informative or a condition. So that's just, it looks like going down the informative route. I mean, I am frustrated, with car parking that we haven't got more data on that. Through analysis, we toss up here between members, aren't we, that it sounds like, well, there should be a lot more capacity, but then patients at the moment can be waiting half an hour for their appointment, and if it's a more efficient, you can actually, for the 2 hours that one patient takes up in car parking, you might get 3 people through if it's efficiently done. So, but we don't know that, and it's a disappointment that we didn't get more data on that and an actual analysis to help us, so we wouldn't be having this debate. So it's whether, as long as the informative in my mind can ensure that kind of data comes back when it's been brought in as a master plan 2.0, then to my mind, that's fine. But if that doesn't ensure that, then we need to go one step further, because we must ensure that, in my opinion. And if the final thing is the accommodation. Many of you won't know, but I've worked with the medical profession for 35 years. So typically speaking, the 3 to 6 months accommodation is provided for the junior doctors who come on short-term placements at a hospital. So it's quite hard for them to get the private sector accommodation unless it's a specific private sector accommodation who facilitates that. But I understand, Mr. Edmondson, that if they don't get the master plan 2.0 through, this will not proceed. So again, the accommodation comes into that whole conversation if we get the master 2.0. Is that correct?
The comment was made on site about that today. That was relatively new to me, that this meant that this scheme wouldn't go ahead if the rest of it didn't happen, because I thought this would be a part that they could do anyway. But I should just reassure members that the Trust are working tirelessly to try and sort out parking, because they do deal with a lot of complaints from staff. They get missed appointments, as people have mentioned earlier. And they are working on a multi-storey car park proposal for the site, and that will be part and parcel of a later submission. And also have been working on a park and ride proposal as well on a particular site, and they've had a company looking at the feasibility of that. So they are looking at options to provide, because they do recognise what a challenge it is for local residents, an impact on local residents. So I do think there's work going on, but the argument here was 20 loos, 20 being provided elsewhere, and they were staff ones specifically. So, but certainly take on board, and we're happy to word an informative that addresses those 3 matters. Perhaps we could tighten up the wording of that condition to do with solar panels anyway, and that would give that indication. And then we'll set up this all-member briefing on the latest iteration of the master plan.
Well, colleagues, if it's okay with you, I'd like to call an adjournment here, just so people can work up that informative and potentially changing the wording of the condition on solar. And once we've done that, then we can have a proposal and a seconder and vote on it accordingly. So, 5 minutes? Sorry?
Just before you have the adjournment, Chairman, I think the committee need to bear in mind the difference between the conditions and the informatives. So the planning permission is the grant together with the conditions. Those are the enforceable parts of the document. The informatives are generally advisory. So if one was to take, for example, the solar panels, one would have the condition that is there, and the informative would be that the council would like to see certain details as part of the submission. It would be for the trust then to decide what it wouldn't be bound by that. It would be the trust to decide what it was going to submit, but then it would be for the officers to approve that or otherwise based upon that submission. So it's important that the informatives are not binding on the developer. Anything that has to be binding on them should be inserted as a condition. And that will need to be precise and enforceable. And so, yeah, it's important in looking at the wording that the committee bears that in mind.
Thank you, Mr. Cattrall. So, sorry?
Did you want to adjourn? We haven't gone into adjournment yet.
I know, yeah. So we're doing adjournment. We can then discuss amongst ourselves the informative and whether we want to have informative in as a condition and then come back. Councillor Strang? Excellent. We are back. Thank you very much for anybody who was watching online, waiting while we did our deliberations on certain matters. So, members, I'm going to ask the clerk to read out the new proposal, and then subsequently who will be the proposer and the seconder accordingly. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. So the proposal is approval subject to the following conditions being amended. So the condition regarding construction, demolition, management plan and cycle parking strategy shall be approved by the local planning authority. And the condition regarding solar panels ensuring demonstration of maximisation of roof spaces available to provide the greatest amount of energy production, with the conditions as outlined in the submitted report, with final drafting delegated to the Divisional Director, and the completion of a Section 106 legal agreement to secure tree mitigation payment of circa 71,000. The resolution of any new material considerations that may come to light following the Planning Committee to be delegated to the Divisional Director of Planning, with an informative. So, number one, as part of the submission of future applications, the Trust is requested to submit details to the local planning authority to clarify that sufficient car parking and replacement residential accommodation will be provided. Number two, to discharge the condition on solar panels, the applicant is informed that the local planning authority would anticipate the orientation and number of solar panels shown may increase. Same would not require revised plans to be submitted in their own right, with the final wording of this informative being delegated to the Divisional Director of Planning.
Thank you, Clerk. Just one point, Clerk, we missed the bit about the cycle where it had to be approved by the local planning.
I wrapped that up in. Sorry, Chairman, I wrapped that up in both, so I apologies. I wrapped that up as the two amendments to the conditions regarding cycle parking strategy and demolition.
Thank you, that's fine. So just go on to debate on, we need a proposer, proposed by Councillor Strang, seconder, Councillor Fox. Just open up to debate now for the new proposal. Councillor Billings.
Yeah, I think, Chair, I'd entirely support Councillors Fox and Strang with that revised proposal. To me, it satisfies the concerns that members have discussed in debate. It gives the Trust a heads up in terms of what's expected of them, but it doesn't delay in any way the much needed facilities and those being brought forward at the earliest opportunity. I think that strikes the appropriate balance and also provides for the energy enhancement measures of the solar and gives and makes it clear that there's some latitude for them to discharge that condition in there. So I'd very much be supporting this and we'll be voting for it. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Fox.
I think we've got the situation where we want this to go ahead as quickly as possible. It's really important for Torbay, for Torbay's health provision, but we're also mindful of the concerns of residents in that area about the parking and the fact the inadequacy of the current parking, and therefore we've used the informative method as a way of not causing any delay, but nonetheless signifying the concern that we as members have.
Thank you, Councillor Fox. One question I have for those proposed and seconded, and Mr. Edmondson. I remember when we were on the site that one thing they'd want to do is get on with the substation as quickly as possible. I just want to ensure that what we're doing here doesn't stop that from happening.
Don't believe it does at all, Chairman. There are conditions they need to submit information to discharge, but it wouldn't prevent the implementation of the permission once those conditions discharge and getting straight on and doing the substation, which is critical by the sound of it.
Well, I think personally we've done a really good job here, committee, in trying, making sure this goes forward, but heeding the issues which are very prevalent with our local residents on parking and on the accommodation. So if anybody's no more conversation, I'll just move to vote. All those in favour?
That's unanimous, Chairman.
Excellent. Well, I now call this meeting to finish. Thank you.